And let's talk about GLAAD and their latest poll regarding they do this thing called Where We Are on TV report. So apparently, especially with this current administration, it looks like the Levitical community is going through it, where we're starting to see less of ourselves being represented on screen. So, according to a report, shout out to the Rap from this for this story, for the Rap, which tracked regular and recurring LGBTQ plus characters that appeared during the 2024-2025 television season. Queer characters increased according platforms by 4%, bringing the total to 489. However, the Thursday report found that 41% of those characters will not return due to a series cancellations or endings, limited series formats, or a character's death or exit. While this year's study marks an increase after 2 years of decline, it remains far below the 2021-2022 record high of 637 LGBTQ plus characters on screen, saying, quote, there is a definite concern that it's not going to bounce back next year and see a growth just in terms of what's been announced up to this moment, GLAAD's Megan Townsend told the Wrap. We have not had a ton of announcements or news about new series and returning series within the research period that will make up for some of these losses, which is true because it's like we don't have a lot of shows. I mean, we have Boots. That's the only thing I can think of, but there aren't really a lot of queer centered shows. Or what's that show that is on Amazon Prime with Benito Skinner that just got a second season? That was the recent announcement they got a second season. So that's one show. I named two. I named that show with Boots. And I guess the final season of Stranger Things. But yeah, like they said, that show ain't coming back after this is done. Then they went on to mention trans characters. So trans characters may be especially at risk as their right to exist has been called into question under the second Trump administration. GLAAD counted 33 trans characters on TV this year, but only four appear on series that have been officially renewed, though the tally of trans characters increased by nine from the previous year. In fact, there was more trans characters counted than in the previous study, but 61% of those characters would not return due to series cancellations or endings. I remember also there were people, a bunch of turfs that were coming out talking about how, oh, well, it seems like now you don't hear a lot of people coming out as trans and stuff because then it's going to show that it was all a myth. It was all a trend. And it's like, no, under this current administration, you think trans people feel safe to actually get up on a poll and admit that now more than ever, especially with Gen Z, there are more people that are coming out in queer than any other demographic, more so than millennials, more so than Gen X, more so than boomers, and I guess what's left of the silent era. So there are more Gen Zers coming out as queer. But when it comes to these polls or whatever, yeah, if I'm not feeling safe as a trans person, why the fuck would I even admit that I'm trans? I'm gonna keep that shit secret until you know, I feel safe enough to do so. Now we got a recent thing where the administration is trying to prevent trans people from changing their gender on their passport. So this is the latest thing. I'll tell you their favorite sign when it comes to math or subtraction. They love taking shit away from people and offering no solution. So queer people of color made up of 51% of the LGBTQ plus characters on screen, a slight increase from last year, but there were steps back for specific ethnic groups, including Indigenous, Middle Eastern, North African, well, I should say Middle Eastern slash North African, and Black Levitical plus characters, each decreasing year over year. Well, yeah, well, quiet as it's kept, whenever it comes to queer people, it always seems like white people get to step to the front of the line, whereas more and more queer people of color continue to either be in the background or just be non-existent. So we definitely need to work on that. But they said nearly a third of non-Levitical plus Americans say that Levitical plus inclusive media has changed their perception of our community. Sarah K. Ellis, CEO and president of GLAAD said. Today, we are at a critical juncture with hateful rhetoric running unchecked from politicians and news media and given a falsely amplified platform, even as the majority of this country overwhelmingly supports the Levitical Plus community, with so many diverse, entertaining, and impactful series being canceled at an alarming rate. It is imperative that networks and streamers do not back down. And that's why I was saying, like, we need the networks to fight back more than ever. It seems like many of the work may be put on the shoulders of RuPaul's Drag Race, because RuPaul's Drag Race tends to be the only show where you get to see a diverse group of queer characters and they get to tell their stories and that other thing. So, in between the shenanigans of the drama and everything else, we do get to see those personal moments between them. And it seems like it's going to be on their shoulders if we can't get other shows and streamers to be brave enough to tell the stories of all these diverse queer people. Because I've always said that television has been the platform that people use to see people in a light that they would not normally encounter. When we were seeing trans people being seen more so as human beings, we were seeing that reflection. And I would even say, especially during the Biden administration, we were seeing more of that clarity. And even during, like, because didn't Pose come out during the Trump administration? But I think that show was on before he became president. So they were able to, you were kind of able to see that shine through. So TV has always been, I felt like, a reflection of seeing those queer characters. Now it seems like, because of situations, anytime you put any kind of queerness on TV, people want to complain. And especially when it comes to shows like The Last of Us. The first season with the gay guys, and then the second season with Ellie and, her hobnobbing with having her little girlfriend. So now, across the 8 major streaming services, GLAAD counted 372 Levitical Plus characters, an increase from the previous study. As for scripted broadcasts, only 9.3% of the series regulars were LGBTQ plus. On primetime cable, there were 64 LGBTQ plus. Okay, I'm going to start using queer. I'm tired of using all of them damn acronyms. A decrease of 13 from the last study, but more than half of that representation came from FX and HBO alone. It's either I'm gonna use queer or Levitical. Levitical is basically how I pronounce LGBTQ plus as one word. Shout out to T.S. Madison, because that's where I got it from. Queer representation on linear television has continually declined, according to the report, saying, quote, there are particular titles, particular showrunners, particular networks who are really kind of carrying a lot of weight. There is, and this is according to Townsend, there is potential for a huge change year over year in numbers if a network cancels a particular title, or on the positive side, if they put a title with a queer ensemble into production. Shows like What We Do in the Shadows, they canceled that. English Teacher's supposed to get a second season. Grotesquerie was terrible, and that was on FX, made the network the second most inclusive with 17 Levitical plus characters. HBO emerged on top with 18 queer characters across The Last of Us, House of the Drag Queen, and Somebody Somewhere. One point of concern for the GLAAD team was the lack of Levitical plus characters. See, this is the part where I find it annoying, because I'm like, because they're talking about what HIV represented. So it's like, why we gotta put HIV people in point here? Because everybody look at us, that's the gay man disease. But they said something in the article that made a whole lot of sense. I'm like, okay, so I then I kind of looked the other way, because I think it's a traumatic situation for me, because growing up in the 90s and the 2000s, and me thinking that as a homosexual man, I was going to end up with HIV, because that was kind of like the stigma they put on all of us. Or we all going to get AIDS and die. That was kind of like the narrative. But um that's all we would see on TV. And it kind of always felt like there was a sense of self-loathing that came with all of that. So that was always like a trauma situation. That's like, why is that always the thing? Like, the only way gay people get to be represented is we got to be dying of AIDS and all that other stuff. And that we were bombarded with a lot of those movies, a lot of those storylines on TV shows, all the things in between. But what I realized is that, because I'm well versed in understanding HIV and all this stuff, especially my background of working in health. They're saying this younger generation, particularly Gen Z, are less knowledgeable about the disease than other generations. So When it comes to HIV stigma and representation, they need that because then a lot of Gen Z who watch a lot of TikTok videos and what they call them, those micro episode type situations, if you incorporate that into a lot of the shows, that makes these kids be aware of, protecting themselves when they're getting into sexual relations or things of that nature. Because we definitely see a lot of, especially if you watch a lot of adult cinematography, a lot of barebacking goes on. And a lot of these young kids are naive that they don't think about the possibility that, yeah, you have unprotected sex with someone who's not forthright about their sexual history. You can end up with the Rhea or the Idia and the Iphilus and the high five, which is the big one. So you can end up with all these different things, and people, or the herp, and some people don't be telling you their situation, and then here you go burning because you don't know the tea. And they're not teaching sex education to these kids because these ding that bat parents be thinking that, oh, you teaching them safe sex or sex education is basically promoting them to go out and have sex. No, it's letting them know because kids gonna do what they're gonna do regardless, especially with them hormones racing. So you either inform them so that way when they go out, they're prepared, or in the words of Usher, let them burn, let them burn, let them burn. So Townsend also noted that Gen Z stood out as the key demographic fueling demand for inclusive media, with 23% in the US identifying as libidical plus, which is what I said. There's more people, especially in the Gen Z demographic, that are coming out as queer than any other demographic. YA stories have continued to include libidical plus characters. Now, over 84 million American adults say they're more likely to watch a TV show if it features at least one queer character. The LGBTQ plus buying power in the US is an estimated 1.4 trillion and is set to grow, with 23% of Gen Z adults identifying as libidical plus, a number that continues to rise and which we see at similar levels across the globe. This audience has continued to tune in year after year and who further support their favorite franchises through merch and experience purchases, social media, and more. So at the end of the day, people want to see themselves represented on TV. There's no agenda. There's nobody going to try to convert you, whatever the case is. We're not queer people are not a religion. Religious people try to convert you to their shit because they want your money. Being queer is in the DNA. It's something you can't change. It's part of who you are. So when people see themselves represented, especially when they're from a marginalized community, I feel like that helps them deal with things in life. And also those people who may not be familiar, it opens them up to some new kind of representation. So yeah, I know that was a lot, but I'm hopefully things change, but who knows up under this administration. So yes, I definitely want to hear from y'all. What do you guys think of this story? In regards of, the fact that queer representation on TV is on the decline. I think we need to do better. And I do definitely think that art, and many a times when we've been when you've dealt, especially when you look at history regarding art and fascism, whenever it's come to that, art has always pushed back against the establishment. And I think that's what people in film, television, music needs to push back against authoritarianism and things of that nature, and just tell the stories that people want to be told, because at the end of the day, people just want to see themselves represented. So let me know what you guys think of this story in the comments down below.